And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to attachment styles. Your brain kind of shifts into this space where it's looking for things to help make you more secure, but is also looking for the signs that validate why you have the type of attachment that you do. Welcome back to Unfiltered Yaps. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast where we show up for ourselves and for each other. I'm your host, Shanae, and as always, we're going to keep it honest, we're going to keep it messy, and we're going to keep it real. Before I jump into what this week's episode is about, I have a correction or a clarification that I need to make. A friend of mine's reached out, and on the episode about finances, I mentioned the budgeting tool that I use, and I was just like, "Oh, it's YNAB," and I moved on. And she was like, "Hey, I didn't really catch what that was," and when I sent her the link, like, "Oh, this is what I use," she was kind of like, "I would have never gotten there," and so I wanted to take a second to like clear it up a little bit. The app that I use, it's a website, it's a app that you can also put on your phone. It's You Need a Budget. The acronym for that is YNAB. So YNAB, YNAB. Um, and on that episode, in the Substack, on the YouTube like description, on this episode's YouTube description, and the show notes, I will put in the resource section a link that I have. I'm not sponsored by this app by any means, but because I'm a member, I do have like a link that I can share with you guys. So I will share that link for You Need a Budget, also known as YNAB. If you're interested, check it out. With that said, today's episode is about attachment styles. Um, this is something that I've been thinking about talking about for a while. As you guys know, like I usually focus on things that is relevant to me in the moment, and attachment styles is very relevant to me. And I'm sure like you've heard of attachment styles, even if you don't know exactly what they are. And they kind of affect you in so many ways. They affect your friendships, they affect your dating, they can affect how you show up at work, how you interact with coworkers. And so on this episode, we're going to unpack what they are and, how we deal with them and how we move towards healthier, more secure attachments if you have an insecure type of attachment. With that said, we're going to get into the question of the week. And before doing that, I want to kind of explain to you what the attachments even are, like what the options are, I guess. Not options, because it's not like you get to choose, "Oh, I'm going to be one of these insecure ones instead of being secure," but you get the point. Um, and so the note here is psychologists claim that people tend to fall into one of four attachment styles or move between them depending on the relationship. A secure attachment feels confident in their partner, will be there for them when needed, and open to depending on others and having others depend on them. Dismissive avoidant may appear not to care too much about close relationships and may prefer not to be too dependent upon other people or have people depend upon them. Anxious, preoccupied attachers worry that others may not love them completely, and they may be easily frustrated or angered when their attachment needs go unmet. Fearful avoidant lives in an ambivalent state of being. They're both afraid of being too close, but also afraid of being too distant. They may attempt to keep their feelings at bay, but are unable to. And they can't just avoid their anxiety or run away from their feelings. I know that was a lot. I want you guys to kind of sit with that and think about which one you are, what feels natural to you. And these definitions are in the context of romantic partnerships. But a little bit later, I will go into how I learned about attachment styles and give you some different definitions. Not different in that the style of them is changing, but more of the perspective you should be thinking about applied to the definitions. And so, with all of that said and out of the way, the question of the week is, what is your relationship attachment style and why? The first answer I got here was, I feel like a fearful avoidant on the inside, but I cope with my anxieties in a dismissive avoidant way, i.e., I put up walls, make myself look more confident and more well put together than I am, refusing to be vulnerable out of fear of rejection. Um, it's interesting to me. Fearful avoidant is not my attachment style, and I will get into what my attachment style is a little bit later. But fearful avoidant to me is an interesting one because I feel like they want to be close, but they want to be to create distance, and um, it's interesting. It's an interesting space to be in because how do you find peace when you want to be close, but you also want to be distant and protect yourself? The next one I got here is, for my relationship with my husband, I am very secure. He's my constant. I guess I'm also like this with my family too, parents and sisters, since we're very supportive of each other. For everyone else, though, I flip flop between dismissive and fearful avoidant. I'm pretty introverted, so I really don't want many relationships that I need to maintain. But at the same time, I'm afraid of rejection, so I try not to put myself out there. I included this one for a few reasons. The first one being that I like that this person was like, with these people, I'm secure, but with everyone else, my attachment is like this. And I think that's so important to highlight because in a healthy relationship, if you have an insecure attachment style, you are able to grow when there is safety, when you feel safe with a person. And so I thought it was very important that she called out, like, my parents, my sisters, my husband, I am secure. And so she knows that in those relationships, she can give and also receive from others. She can be dependent, um, dependable, and those people that she mentioned, she feels like she can depend on. Um, and then I thought it was also important to see that, like, you can have that and still have this insecure type of attachment style, which um, she's saying that she does have. And so I think it's important to see the full spectrum of it all. What is your relationship attachment style and why? My attachment style is somewhat dismissive avoidant. I was very solitary growing up and had to rely on myself, so I never really learned how to get attached to people or count on them. It's like a part of me equated intimacy with loss of independence and vulnerability, and I value being safe and self sufficient. I thought that this was so important to include here, especially as a black woman. I feel like women in general, but especially black women, are often hyper independent. We feel like we have to do everything by ourselves because no one else is going to do what we need to get done. And I think some of that helps feed into this dismissive avoidant attachment style, because somewhere along the line you learned early on that you can't depend on others and you can only depend on yourself. And so when someone comes into your life, into your space, you start to feel smothered or attacked because you're losing your sense of independency. um, and so I thought that was interesting and wanted to include for anyone out there who connects with this. The next response here is secure attachment. I'm a pretty secure introvert that has had healthy relationships throughout my life. Why? I think it had to do with examples of healthy expectations thanks to my parents and certain members of my extended family. I don't invest in people that I don't trust or care about. I wanted to include that specifically because of the part about healthy examples. Um, Again, later on, I'm going to give you some different definitions. And when I give you those, I want you to sit with them and like kind of apply it to what this person is saying about the examples that they saw growing up. The next answer here is dismissive avoidant. People tend to believe that I like them better than I do at first, as I can be cheerful and like to cuddle. But actually depending on them and believing that the two of us will work out, that's a whole other thing. Why? Hard to explain why exactly. Maybe I was born that way, maybe because of experiences, probably both. I was born very skeptical of everything. Once I learned something the hard way, it sticks forever. I also hate disappointment, unforeseen negative turns of event, and deal with that very poorly. So instead, I expect the worst going into most things. This I thought was so intense, and I felt so much empathy for the person as I read this response because, again, this isn't my attachment style, but I can empathize with how it must feel to be afraid to put your trust into people, especially because of all these other circumstances, all these other situations that have happened to you that constantly reinforce this message. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to attachment styles. Your brain kind of shifts into this space where it's looking for things to help make you more secure, but is also looking for the signs that validate why you have the type of attachment that you do. And that was the last answer for this week. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, I always am picking a topic that is relevant to me and where I'm at and what I'm learning and what I'm focusing on. And I want to share that with you guys because you guys are my community. And I am an anxiously attached girly. I didn't have the vocabulary for that at first, though. I always remembered like being in situation ship things and starting off like here as the baseline and then over time feeling like this rise like in my body that I couldn't explain. I didn't know what it was. I really didn't understand what having anxiety in general was at that time. I just knew I was feeling something in my body and I didn't like it. And the closer I got to the end of a situation, the more I felt that sensation rising in my body. Um, and I just, at the same time, always had this fear of like, I was doing too much. I wanted to be close to whoever the person was at the time, but like not wanting them to feel smothered by me, not wanting them to feel like I was doing too much. And so I didn't ask for certain things. I didn't say certain things because in my brain, I thought I was being chill, but I think outwardly, I probably was not. Well, not in my brain. I don't think in my brain I knew I wasn't chill, but I think outwardly I was trying to project that I was, but I probably wasn't doing that either. Like I probably was coming across as anxious as I actually was in my mind. Um and I think a part of it was that I just wanted to be seen, and I wanted the other person to feel like I saw them too, to have us both be integrated into each other's lives. And so I would have that feeling. It would come and go depending on like who I was talking to, how long we had been talking, and I never had a word for it. Like I didn't know what it was. I wasn't in therapy at the time, so like I didn't have anyone to really talk about it with. And it wasn't until my last year of college, my last semester of college actually, I took a I needed an extra elective. I took a random psychology class. Again, I've mentioned this before. I thought about being a therapist. I was already at the end of my schooling, so I was like, well, I'm not gonna do that now. So like the least I can do is take this elective. And so it was like a childhood psychology class. And one day there was a lesson on attachment styles, but from a childhood perspective. And it was the first time I think I realized that the people I was dating, the situations I was getting myself involved in, the reason that I was feeling the way that I was feeling with these people was rooted in childhood trauma. Um, and that trauma kind of shaped everything that I did after. The way I learned to attach as a child was shaping all of my connections, you know, in adulthood. And so in class, we there's a study. It's called the Strain Situation Study by Mary Answorth. The experiment was done on babies, where basically the caregivers would like leave their children in a room, and then when the parents or the caregivers came back into the room, they would monitor basically how the baby reacted. And so these descriptions that I'm gonna give right now is how I learned about attachment. And again, was I was able to take these definitions and put them into the perspective of how I act now by understanding basically how my childhood was. So in the study, the secure babies might cry, they might show a little distress when the caregiver leaves, but they would calm down really quickly. And when the caregiver returns, they would be fine. They trusted that the caregiver would eventually come back and like meet their needs. As an adult, this shows up as you trust that you can depend on people, and they will be there, and you are open to giving and being dependable in return. For the dismissive avoidant babies, they didn't show a lot of outward reaction when their parent left or came back, but there were other signs like increased heart rates that showed that these babies were not comfortable. However, learned not to seek out comfort because it wouldn't be available to them. And so as adults, that looks like downplaying the need for closeness, avoiding being dependable, avoiding depending on others, appearing like you just don't care about the relationship at all. The anxious babies would become very distressed when the caregiver left, and they had a hard time calming down after the caregiver returned. They weren't fully able to soothe themselves, and they didn't really feel like someone else would soothe them because of inconsistencies in care. So as adults, this can show up as worrying that others don't really love you, needing reassurance, and really feeling upset when your needs are not met. And then the fearful avoidant babies kind of had confusing behavior. It could kind of go either way. Sometimes they would freeze, sometimes they would avoid, sometimes they would show fear. And as adults, this can like look like craving closeness, but also not wanting to be close to others, fearing of relationships with others, pushing people away, but also wanting to pull them close. And I've been unpacking this. I took that class in 2017, 2018. And from then until now, I've been unpacking attachment in different ways. The conversations have evolved over time as I learn more about myself and I grow and I think about my needs and what it means to have my needs met. And I think what I'm learning now is that I do have an anxious attachment style. I wasn't a crier as a baby. Like it wasn't that I was afraid of my mom like leaving or coming back. I think the biggest thing for me during that class, even now as I'm having this conversation that I think about is she would leave me in the house a lot as a child, like really young. I had no business being in the house alone by myself. And I wasn't like crying that she would leave, but she would be like, "Don't answer the phone, don't answer the door." And it was like, okay, if I follow these rules, these are the two rules I have. If I follow these rules, then like not that I'll be okay. Um more like I knew that I was too young. I not that I knew I was too young. I knew something wasn't right about me being in the house by myself at this age. Like I knew it wasn't normal. I knew it wasn't the correct circumstance. I just knew deep in my body that it was wrong. And I didn't know why it was wrong, but I just knew it was wrong. And it was like, okay, these are the two rules that I have. Don't answer the door, don't answer the phone. If I do those things, I'll be safe, basically. And so I think I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure it was causing a lot of anxiety because those are two big rules for you to have as a child. And not only two big rules to have, but like as a child, you're not thinking about, oh, somebody's gonna knock on the door. And if they do knock on the door, like your parent should be there to answer, or an adult should be there to answer. So you're not thinking, you don't, the door knocks. I don't know. I think I was just kind of like, it's not for me, like people knock on doors sometimes, but they're not knocking on the door for me. And so it just made me more aware and not like, I wasn't like, "Oh, there's a sound in the hallway and now I'm scared." But it just made me more aware that like somebody could come and knock on the door. Somebody could call, and if I answer, is someone out there and they're paying attention and like know that. And so that thought process, the continued I was having big thoughts in a continuous cycle as a child, and I think that contributed to my anxiety and my needs weren't being met because I had to kind of grow up and be like, okay, you can't answer the door and you don't answer the phone. And I think over time, that has grown and spiraled into other things, other lessons from things with my mom. But I think now, as I unpack with my therapist, a lot of the focus is on like, okay, I do have an insecure attachment, and what does it mean? I get anxious, and what do I need to not be anxious? Because that is the whole purpose. If you know what you need and are able to speak about what you need and are able to set boundaries, that can help calm some of that anxiety, which is again why I included that response where the person was like, I'm secure with these people. I'm not secure with other people. I have this type of attachment style, but I know I have these group of people that I can depend on. And then I had a really good like culturally relevant, well, I don't not that much relevant now because this is from a few years ago, but like a pop culture moment that I think does a good job of highlighting both an anxious attachment style and an avoidant. Um, and that is Chelsea and Jimmy from Love is Blind season 6. That is the season where they were in Charlotte, and Chelsea was the girl who said that she looked like Megan Fox. And Chelsea, uh, as y'all know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just seeing things that resonate with me, that resonate what I've learned about attachment styles, and I am assuming um, that she is anxious, and it is just for the education, the psychoanalysis of attachment styles, just to give tangible examples of things to me that match up with that attachment style. Chelsea, to me, matches an anxious attachment style, and the examples of that was she would pick fights a lot of the time with Jimmy because she was trying to test his commitment. That if she argued with him and he still chose to fight for her, that it was reassurance that he really wanted to be there. She would struggle with regulating her emotions. She would like spiral a lot. She would shut down during their arguments. There's a scene where he called her clingy, and people with an anxious attachment style already feel like they're too much. And you kind of just see how when he said that specific word to her, it kind of just like smacked her in the chest because it was like the worst possible thing that she could hear with an anxious attachment style. Um, she had People with anxious attachment styles tend to be drawn to partners who are unsure of them because they feel like if they can earn that like love or pull that emotion out of them, it somehow makes them not better but like chosen. um and so her picking Jimmy when I think he was kind of unsure of her in the pods. He was going back and forth between her and what was the other girl? Jess. And meanwhile, Trevor, not that he was any better in the end, but like was consistently reassuring her that like he had emotions for her and he wanted it, but like Jimmy wouldn't kind of do that. Um, it just shows again how anxious people can just be attached to people who don't do that because again of that need to like if I pull it out of you then I've earned it and like you really want to be here. Another thing that anxiously attached people do that she did was she would sometimes use sex as a way to increase intimacy between her and Jimmy. When she felt like disconnected or insecure, she would engage in sex with him because in her mind you only want to have sex with people you have like some kind of feeling for, and whatever him choosing to have sex with her validated that in her mind. um Another example is when Jimmy made that comment about AD's body, about like how good her body was, or she was stacked, or whatever it was that he said. She pretended to be okay with it and then spiraled about it later on, made a whole big deal about it later on because she wanted to kind of pretend that she was the cool girl. And so if she went along with it and was like, oh, um, I can, talk to Chelsea about anything. I can say whatever's on my mind, but like deep down inside it made her feel bad about herself. Um, and the last thing I put here for Chelsea was she wanted Jimmy to tell her he loved her all day, every day. When she pushed him away at the end of not the end, but there's a scene where they're like fighting and she's like, okay, well, like this is over. And he was like, okay, like it's over. And then she was like, no, it's not over. Like, I want to be with you because in her mind, if she was like, oh, this is over, and then he said, oh no, I want to be with you. This can't be over. I want to fight for you. I want to fight for us, was him choosing her. And as an anxiously attached girly myself, I understand like wanting to be chosen, wanting to have someone be like, no, I'm all in on you. And she would ask him things like, oh, you're 100% in, but like, are you 1,000%? And it's like, well, girl, what's the difference between 100 and 1,000? Um, and so Jimmy was very much avoidant. And we seen that a lot in his like nonchalant behavior. He was very vague with her about his feelings, I think. Um, Again, calling Chelsea clingy, um, because she needed reassurance. And to him, that felt smothering. And it's a twisted example because Chelsea was anxious. And so that added weight. But like, even without that, even if she was secure and just like, because I think secure people need reassurance too. Not need, but like it's nice to have. And a secure person would know to ask for it or make it clear that they need to know where they stand. And it could have been a secure person, and Jimmy probably would still be like, that feels a little clingy, because as an avoidant, it feels like someone wanting to know where you stand is smothering. Um, when Chelsea would ask for more emotional reassurance, he kind of would like retreat away from that. I think we seen a lot of in his body language where his face would kind of be flat and blank, that he was kind of like pulling away. And then the last thing I wrote for Jimmy was him not picking Jess, although he was really into her in the pods. I think everyone was surprised that he ended up picking Chelsea because he was so into Jess. I think they had really good conversations, but then when she told him that he had a child, that's when you see him fully pull away because of the um weight of that responsibility of her having a child. It was very triggering for someone who's avoidant, because it's like, that makes this real. It makes it harder for me to pull away from something like this. And so I don't really have I don't have examples of the other two, the um, kind of disorganized attachment and a secure attachment. Um, the reason I picked anxious and avoidant is because that's a pattern you see a lot more. Like, anxious and avoidant attachers go together real bad, okay? I don't know why it is exactly, but they always find each other, and it's very cat and mouse, very push and pull, until someone finally has enough and like the end. Uh, but I thought about Chelsea and Jimmy as I was putting this episode together, and I was like, yeah, that's a good, fairly recent example that I think people could understand and like connect with. But with all that said, as I've been saying, attachment styles are not fixed. You are not forced to keep this style. You can ebb and flow between all of them. It's really just a pattern of habits that you have, and being able to recognize the pattern is what helps you heal. Um, and healing really is very much about putting the boundaries in place that you need, asking for what you need, speaking up for yourself. I am an anxiously attached girly, and I was just talking with my therapist about this. And, what do I need? What is something I need to feel secure in any partnership? And again, not just with a romantic partner, but like with friends as well. And I need reassurance. And that doesn't mean telling me every day, like, oh, I like you. Oh, I love being your friend. It's about action. It's about everything you put into that relationship that helps me affirm that. I think about my friends, and a lot of the time they say things like, oh, I'm so proud of you, or, um, One of my friends said to me a few weeks ago, like, I see your growth. I see how much you've been growing. And the act of seeing me is reassurance because you're paying attention to the things that I do. Um, I was getting ready to say to keep track of me, but not in that way. Not that you're like keeping tabs on me, but like I'm doing things not for other people, but for myself. And for me to be a better person, and you see me putting in that work, and it's very reassuring. I think my friends are also very empathetic, um, in that I go through things or I deal with things or I'm working through things that I've been through. And when I do find the time to say something, they, even if they haven't been through, they, even when they can't sympathize, they empathize and say things like, I understand how or why you would feel that way. And that is important for me. It reassures me that they want to be my friend. They are as invested in me as I am in them. And that helps me feel safe and be more vulnerable with my friends. And so I kind of want the same thing in a relationship with a partner. Like, I know that I have an anxious attachment style, and that starts with me saying, hey, in order to feel secure in a situation, this is what I need. And that could be something as simple as like, if you're going to be busy, let me know that you're going to be busy. And I would probably say that in a softer way, maybe. But like, hey, if we're texting and you just disappear, I don't enjoy that. And so I get it. We're busy people. Just let me know, because I would let you know, hey, I'm doing so and so and I'll be busy. Um, for me, it's like common courtesy. Having the courtesy to tell me that um, reassures me that like you care if I care that you went missing. Um, and so yeah, it's really that simple. I think what I'm really getting to with my therapist is there is nothing wrong with me having an insecure attachment. There's nothing wrong with me being anxiously attached, as long as I know and understand what it is that I need and use my voice to speak up about that, and not be ashamed of that. I think before I understood attachment styles, I was ashamed that like I felt needy, like I need you to do this, I need you to do that. But it was like, no, I was asking for safety, and the right person will do that for you. And but it's a balance. It's about knowing, catching yourself in the spiral, not allowing yourself to spiral about something, but again, having good communication, having clear expectations, um, having people know what you expect from them, and knowing what they expect from you is the only way for any of these attachment styles to create a secure foundation. And so listener letters, I still don't have anything. I'm begging, guys, please send me a letter if you just want to vent. I will share it here. It can be anonymous. You can send that to unfilteredyaps@gmail.com. Again, it doesn't have to center around any specific topic, just whatever you want to share or whatever you would like advice about, from me, from the community, etc. In terms of the journal prompt this week, we have, when do I feel most secure in my relationships and what helps me get there? As always, I will answer the journal prompt on my Substack. Um, I have every journal prompt from this episode on back on there. So if you need any inspiration on how to answer the prompt, you can always look there. In terms of resources, I don't really have any resources this week, but if you're interested, I would suggest you look at the study I mentioned, Mary Answorth's strange situation study. You can like Google it. I'm sure it's on YouTube. Um, it's an interesting watch. It's really short. And I think watching it helps you kind of understand the attachment styles better as well. With all of that said, this is where we wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, please like, share, subscribe. To the YouTube channel, subscribe on Substack. Please like, comment, leave reviews. It really helps me grow my podcast. It helps all of the platforms put me in their algorithms and share me with other people who may not have discovered without you doing those things. If you want to follow the podcast, you can follow the podcast at Unfiltered Yaps on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to follow me personally, you can follow me at Shanae's Got Yaps on both Instagram and TikTok as well. Um, and as always, that's a wrap. And I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you so much for yapping with me. Bye.